So welcome again. I love the diversity and I love the dedication. And thanks for being long-term allies with Northern Justice Watch. We really appreciate it. And I think it's being recorded and live streamed now, Altaf. And we have also attendees in the room already. So smile at the camera, and we are now having our attendees. Welcome everyone. And I'm Enes, and I work for the Northern Justice Watch, and it's great to see you. We have guest speakers, our main speaker here, and an exciting topic today, kind of an introduction to international human rights mechanisms. We have our legal expert, Hilal Çelen, with us, and I will introduce our speakers and the project for you to get a better understanding, and we will begin the project. We expect it to last around 2 hours, including the break and a Q&A session and the introductions. Um, we're hoping that we could retain your attention and keep you till the end of the event. I think our Q&A session is already active, so feel free to send your questions. But I think you'll have more questions once our legal expert Hilal starts the presentation. If you have anything in mind, please remember that there are no bad questions. So don't feel bad for not knowing anything, even if it sounds too simple. Please submit your question. We're happy to help you. We're gonna have 10 minutes for the Q&A session. So you might not be able to answer all of your questions, unfortunately, but rest assured, um, we will have 11 more workshops over the next 2 years, and your question may be best answered in one of the following webinars. So if it's a bit more, I guess, sophisticated, we will answer that question. So remember to attend our future workshops as well, and not just this one. That being said, we will be starting in a couple minutes, expecting waiting for a few more attendees to join us, and we will be good to go.
I just give me, this is Shishai. Just give me a few minutes. I'm going to set up again, okay? I'm going to log back.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Okay, welcome everyone again. Um, I would like to start with our program flow. So what we're going to be doing today, what to expect. It's pretty straightforward. We'd like to keep this engaging. So our we're gonna have 10 to 15 minutes of, or up to 20 minutes of our guest speakers delivering their remarks on why they think the life project is important, or what outcomes do they expect, for their human rights advocacy so far in Canada and in other parts of the world, and how the life project is positioned in this advocacy, and maybe the kind of issues that it'll tackle, hopefully. So they will provide you their opinions on what the live project is about. So after maybe 15 to 20 minutes of our guest speakers delivering their remarks, we will have the first part of our event, where our legal expert at Northern Justice Watch, Hilal Chelen, will deliver a very educational presentation on your human rights, both in the Canadian, but especially in international context. What rights do you have? What international mechanisms protect your rights? We will have a 10-minute break after that, and we expect everyone to remain in the room because we're going to have a very educational, important second part where Hilal Çelen will also deliver the second part of it. We expect the second part of the program to be a bit shorter, maybe around 30 to 40 minute range. Um, and throughout the program, this is important, we will have our question and answer feature active. So again, please feel free to submit your questions. If your question is not answered at the end, please remember that we will delve into more in-depth topics in our future workshops. So feel free to attend them. We encourage you to attend them to have answers to your questions. This event is being recorded and live streamed on YouTube. And at the end, we will have a 10-minute session to answer your questions. I would like to talk a little bit about the Life Project. Why are we here today, and what is the Life Project exactly? So at Northern Justice Watch, we sat down and we brainstormed and figured out that there's been a huge gap in advocating for human rights in Canada. We identified insufficient legal awareness and training on human rights and human rights mechanisms as a significant need in marginalized communities. We think that people flee war or other atrocities or genocide and come to Canada, but they don't necessarily know what rights they have under international law or under domestic Canadian law. So we would like to raise awareness on our legal rights and as to kind of equip ourselves with the necessary knowledge. The Live Project aims to close this gap by delivering 12 workshops over the 2 years. So until fall 2026, this is our first workshop, and we will want to deliver at least 10 or 11 more workshops to delve into more in-depth topics, such as how to cooperate with law enforcement or how to work with international courts and all sorts of other interesting topics. So I would like to mention that the Live project is being funded by the Law Foundation of Ontario. So we take great pride in this, and we thank the Law Foundation of Ontario for trusting us with our mission and with our project scope. I'd like to reiterate that our aim uh, with the Law Project is to make justice more accessible to people. So we want the communities, the marginalized communities in Canada, to be able to advocate for themselves. So we have our main speaker. I'd like to introduce our main speaker, Hilal Çelen. She's our legal expert at Northern Justice Watch, and They're volunteering at Northern Justice Watch as the Justice and Accountability Team Director. And she's a practicing lawyer in Turkey as a member of the Istanbul Bar Association and is currently in the licensing process of the Law Society of Ontario. She graduated with high honors in her LLB and holds a master's degree from the University of Toronto, Faculty of Law. Prior to joining Northern Justice Watch, Hilal worked at M&A, corporate, and telecommunications departments of various Canadian companies, as well as the Human Rights Action Group. She is currently working in the in-house legal department of a global IT company. In addition to her legal expertise, Hilal is a volunteer with Habitat for Humanity Greater Ottawa. Hilal's personal background as the child of a refugee has deeply shaped her perspective on human rights issues. She understands the challenges faced by vulnerable communities and is driven to advocate for justice and equality. I would like to thank Hilal again for being with us here today.
Thank you
And
all for coming.
yeah, thank you. We will have plenty of time, Hilal, presenting our very interesting presentation here. So I would like to introduce our guest speakers too. First of all, I really will appreciate our guest speakers who are representatives of marginalized communities in Ontario for being with us here. In no particular order, I would like to start introducing them. Our first guest speaker today is Mr. Sharaf Tharchin. Sharap joined the Canada-Tibet Committee as its executive director in January 2018 after moving to Canada in 2015. He has also worked on GAC-funded projects as an entrepreneurship specialist and proposal consultant for Alinea International in Gatineau, Dharamsala. Before relocating to Canada, Sharap worked with HSYWE in Nepal as an assistant director, focusing on empowering Indigenous women and as deputy chief of Tibet Fund India. He oversaw U.S. aid projects supporting education in Tibetan schools in India and Nepal. Additionally, Sharap worked as a research analyst at Thomson Reuters in Bangalore. Academically, he holds a Master of Management Innovation and Entrepreneurship from Queen's University, Canada, and an MBA from India. Sharaf, thank you for being here and thank for being a reliable long-term partner. And I would like to introduce our next guest speaker, Mr. Fatih Gençoğlu. Fatih is a dedicated leader who actively addresses social cohesion and cultural diversity and interfaith dialogue through expert-led programs and community events. He is committed to cross-cultural understanding and is a member of the Community Equity Council. Fatih's expertise lies in applying data-driven insights to strategic planning and community engagement, enabling him to design and implement impactful programs addressing complex societal challenges. His academic training has fostered a deep understanding of human behavior and decision-making, making him a leader in both professional and social spheres. His dedication to community development and ability to synthesize insights across disciplines make him a valuable asset. Fatih, thanks for being here. And we're looking forward to hearing your perspective. Our third speaker, Mr. Sisay Voldemika. Sisay is a dedicated Tigrayan human rights advocate in Canada, with whom we had the chance to meet earlier this year. Sisay, thanks for being here. Sisay is a constitutional lawyer and justice of the peace, and he's also chair of Tigrayan Canadian Immigration Association and a board member of Ethiopian Canadians for Peace. And last but not least, I'd like to thank Dr. Tahir Sharan for being here. Dr. Tahir Sharan is the representative of the Hazara community in Ontario. He's also a scholar at University of Toronto, working at as part of the physics department on quantum optics. and he has experience, 4 years of experience as a chairman at the World Hazara Council and an international council called the Hazara across the globe. And he has been engaged in human rights advocacy over the last 5 years in Canada, and he is a professor with dedication to advanced science. So thanks for being here as well. I would like to ask questions to our guest speakers why they're here and why they think this project is important. So, uh, Mr. Walde-Mikkel, if you could you please tell us about what you think about the Life Project? How or why is it important, and how it could serve your communities?
Okay, the life project, as I understand it, to be one of the most important role our community can be participating in finding or in pursuing justice to all. Um, our participation in this uh, is that Tigray had went through genocide. Tigray went through war crime against humanity by its own government, Ethiopian government, and the atrocity, the amount of suffering that the Tigrayan people endured for the last 4 years is very, very hard to examine and imagine. Everything was blocked 24 hours, 360 degrees by the Ethiopian government. And the international community had failed to recognize our plight. And one of the tools to be a voice for the voiceless, we believe, is this project. And we, as Tigrayans, are looking for justice in the international arena, mainly because we're Canadians and we reside in Canada. We would like to acknowledge. We would like Canadian government to acknowledge that genocide has been committed. Basically, that's why we believe that this project is very important for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walde-Mikkel. Appreciate your insights, and we could maybe assume that some of our attendees may also not be aware of, I guess, some of the persecutions that we like them to be aware of today. So, and the Tigray genocide is, of course, one of them, the persecution of Tigray, and but also the persecution of other communities that we have representatives here. Perhaps they could also talk a little about the people that they're representing and maybe the things that they've gone through and how it relates to the Life Project. How does it make Life Project even more relevant to their community? So I really appreciate you delivering those remarks. And here, I'd like to ask Mr. Fatih Gençoğlu about their opinions on the outcome of this live project, the expected outcome of this of the live project. So, Mr. Fatih Gençoğlu, you are a human rights activist, and we know you very well, your work. You're dedicated to defending the human rights of your community. What do you hope to achieve by advocating for these rights. What is your vision for better conditions for the community that you're representing, both within Canada and internationally? And what tangible outcomes do you seek in the long term, and how will your efforts contribute to your community's well-being? So if you could uh, talk a little bit about the community you're representing and how this project perhaps could serve them.
Well, thank you, Anas. First of all, it's a privilege to join this webinar. It's very crucial on international legal frameworks. I believe we're not gathering here as an individuals, but advocates, community leaders, and defenders of justice. So we are trying to unite our commitment to fostering a world where fundamental rights or freedoms are upheld for all, not for only my community, for all. As I begin this conversation, I would like to recognize the resilience of those who have been forced to flee persecutions in search of safety, dignity, and justice. Among them are members of Hizmet community, like many others. Well, I know very well about the Tigray community in Ethiopia because I lived there for 7 years, and then I know what they've been through. For those escaping some oppressive regimes, have sought in refugee here in Canada after facing unjust imprisonment, many others unlawful seizures of their property, and relentless persecution under Turkey's current administration. So for my communities, these difficulties is not isolated incident, but part of a larger pattern of human rights abuses that we have seen through the history. Echoing the past witch hunts where entire communities were labeled as threats, denied due process, and stripped of their basic freedoms. Especially the purge in Turkey following the failed coup attempt in 2016 resulted in arbitrary detention of thousands of journalists, teachers, academics, and civil servants. People whose only crime is they believe in education, dialogue, humanitarian service. But yet, despite this hardship, many of these individuals have found a new beginning in Canada. Here, they're not only rebuilding their life, but actively contributing to society, bringing their commitment to education and social cohesion, and of course, community service in their home. I believe their journey reminds us why advocacy is essential, not just for seeking justice, but for ensuring that no community is left defenseless against oppression. I believe why this project is important because injustice anywhere is where a threat to justice everywhere. Being or raising awareness of human rights violation, both in Canada or abroad, we seek to protect the most vulnerable, influence policies, and prevent future abuses. And of course, advocacy is about number. Participation is very important for us. The more voices we raise, the stronger our impact. So increasing participation in human rights efforts help create momentum. And then we have witnessed many of these here in Canada, from grassroots initiatives to legal interventions. It can safeguard the rights of those facing discrimination and injustice. So that's all for now, Ines. I believe we're going to learn lots of things about how our rights to be defended.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Fatih. That was certainly so meaningful, and I think and we are learning from each other as well as our guest speakers also speak. We also understand the importance of, I think, solidarity is that because human rights advocacy is not something that we can effectively do in an isolated way, because I guess, you know, seeing the relentless persecution around the world, it seems that the best option is to come together, And in a world where we advocate for each other as well, because nothing is isolated really. If you're gonna fight crimes against humanity and war crimes and genocide, I think it's a teamwork and not an individual work. So I'm hoping that it's one of the outcomes that we will get out of this workshop as well. So I'd like to um, give this stage to our guest speaker, Mr. Sharap Tarchin. Mr. Sharap Tarchin, as we've also introduced, the executive director of Canada-Tibet Community and doing important work to advocate for Tibetan people in Canada. Um, so, what would your remarks be on your advocacy work as the Tibet community in Canada, and kind of how it relates to maybe legal boundaries or in relation to perhaps legal challenges or legal education that you'd like to draw more attention to in this meeting, and feel free to add other thoughts that you deem important.
Mm. Oh, thank you, Enes. I think we are all each of our group who are participating here. We're dealing against a force that is much stronger than our group. So because we often deal with the oppressed, being a bit kind of a vulnerable group and dealing against a powerful force. In our case, dealing against the PRC. What we often need is a strong solidarity, and for that reason, for us, it's important to work with group that are like-minded, that have gone through similar experiences. So whether it is a group that is participating in this webinar for Northern Justice Watch, or whether it is our coalition members from the Alliance for Genocide Victim Community. For us, it's very important, as Fatih said earlier, the strength in number in advocacy is so important, and we take that very seriously. I was recently sanctioned by China along with 19 other Canadians for our advocacy work. And that reminded me that there's a strong need of awareness and education about the legal rights in this country. Many in our community and people that I know, we have come from places that are usually, that may not provide the same level of legal rights that we see here in Canada. And sometimes, we may get used to being victims and not realizing what rights you have. But learning about it and being really aware about the rights can, I think, make you more feel confident, whether against the face of being sanctioned by a powerful force that is China. So just to share a very quick, experience, when we were initially sanctioned, we were quite, I think most of us were quite overwhelmed, not knowing, how do we react on this? What are the possible implications? But then the more we thought about it, we really, our advocacy work is practiced within the boundary of Canadian law. And as long as practice your advocacy work respecting the rules and regulations and laws of this country, I think what the other force in our case is China, which doesn't really agree with a lot of international norms. How they react is beyond our control. So we don't, worry much about what are the implications and how they're going to react. But as long as we practice our advocacy work within, the scope of Canadian Constitution, and for that reason, I think the project that you're working with, the live project, is important. I think for all of us to be more aware about what the legal rights we have.
Thank you,
Thank
Sheriff,
you.
thank you for also kind of giving insight or summarizing the plight of the Tibetan people and the kind of challenges that they're facing today, and your commentary And here I would like to also allow Dr. Sharan to deliver because he also has a unique experience in human rights advocacy, and we had the chance to work with him in the past. So Dr. Sharan, again, thanks for being here. And my question to you would be what makes the Life project, I guess, different than maybe other initiatives? What sets it apart, and why is it important?
Thank you for your nice introduction, Anis, and thanks to every participants and panelists. It's great to be here, and I'm very proud. Over the last year, at least, I've been working with Northern Justice Watch on different kind of projects on behalf of our communities, and as many other, member of communities, just representatives of the community just mentions. Advocacy is very important in terms of the public awareness, and also the legal aspect of advocacy is something which is very important, especially for the victims community. And I think from my experience, it shows that this area is not really well known to many communities because of the background they have. They are never faced kind of justice in back home that they can actually rely on and then seek for justice. And I think that makes them to think, okay, if you're in Canada or anywhere else outside of the country, what we could do, as a victims, or how we can actually help our community back home who are facing mass killing, atrocity, genocide. And I think this kind of workshop to bring that awareness and then give that legal framework and show to every individual on what kind of rights they might have, and through that legal frame, how they advocate for their communities is very important. In particular, for example, for the Hazara community, who's been actually facing mass killing, genocide, forced displacements for over 130 years. And this is something been systematic, no matter which government were coming to the power over the last 130 years. Well, more or less, they are committing the same kind of a crime against these communities. Of course, some of the fundamentalists, like what is happening during Abdurrahman era, and then the Taliban is very extremist. But this is just ongoing process. And I think for our community, which never actually had that chance to go to any justice courses, asking for justice, and then asking for the recognition of the atrocity they are facing as a genocide, knowing the international legal frame is very important, because we have people across the globe now in more than 30, 40 countries, especially in Western countries, in Europe, North America, and Australia. I think this kind of workshop will be very useful for a community like us to get that education, and then put another lens of or tools for their advocacy behind what so far they were advocating for their community rights, in terms of them organizing demonstration, arranging the seminar, workshop, conferences, outreaching to the politicians. But I think the framework of the legal aspect is very important for us. What we are looking for, hopefully by attending this 11, 12 workshops, we could actually gain some basic foundation that how, for example, we can actually, with the support of legal advisory, which we get engaged through the workshops, and experience of the other communities, how we can, for example, bring the genocide of the Hazara to international court, like in IRCC in Hague, or even at the local area, like Canada, what kind of right we have. For example, I give an example. We can see the Canadian actually consider the Taliban as a terrorist group, but still we can see people are, shaking the flag of the Taliban during the demonstration or the, public, gathering. And this is something. If we have the education, if we know what kind of rights we have, then probably we can act. We have a lot of victims in here, brothers, sisters, son, wife, which were victimized by the extremist group Taliban, Daesh, they are actually would be great to know what kind of right they might have in here and how they can actually pursue justice in this country. But another challenges which we are facing, and we hopefully through, your engagement and expertise who's coming and, talking on this area would be how we really can actually bring the case against the perpetrators. Because in our community case, there are many kind of ongoing, target killing, suicide bombing in a mosque, schools. With a lot of time, this is just name is a Daesh, ICC of Khorasan, or what sometimes Taliban. But then we don't know exactly who's the perpetrator, and then we know for any legal frame we should know to some extent who were the perpetrator, and then we can file a case. But in such a case for Hazara, what kind of how we can tackle this problem, and how we can legally approach this problem to actually have a legal frame for bringing those people to the court and justice. And I think, to make it short, and I'm sure, as other colleagues just mentioned, what is another thing which is important, makes this project is unique, because this project brings different communities together from different, point of view and perspectives, and try to see how they can mobilize them, and how you can support them through these legal tools, that they can actually seek for justice as a collective. And I think this is very strong, and this is very important to have this collective, work together, as what we are doing as a board member of Alliance of Genocide Victim Community. This is what we are doing, which we are trying to bring all this victims community together. Through this project, we are hoping that we can build that bridge as well, and it's not going to be just, I'm sure it's not going to be just 24 months of the project. Is going to build more connection through these communities, and it's going to be helpful in a long term to actually seek for justice.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And yes, we are hoping this to be a sustained project and not just limited to a 2-year period. I guess without further additions, I'd like to allow our legal expert, Hilal Çelen, to begin her presentation. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for that introduction, Enes. Allow me to share my screen for a second.
Here we go. Yeah, we can see it.
Can see it? Perfect. Welcome, everyone. My name is Bedri Hilal Çelen, and I'm the Justice and Accountability Team Director at Northern Justice Watch. Today, we are going to have the first of 12 upcoming seminars under the scope of the LIFE project. So, for today's agenda, we are going to talk about the LIFE project, the developers of the LIFE project, which is Northern Justice Watch, Law Foundation of Ontario, as well as the basics and fundamentals of human rights, Canadian and international human rights, United Nations, and universality of the human rights. So, as I told, this will be the first of 12 upcoming seminars. Through these 12 seminars, we are aiming for Ontarians, all Ontarians, and specifically the victims of atrocity crimes, to learn their rights under Canadian and international law. So by the end of these educations, you know exactly which rights you have under international human rights laws, under Canadian laws, under Ontario Human Rights Code, how to enforce this, where to go to enforce this right, as well as some of the list of pro bono lawyers that we are currently working to represent you, contact information of the pro bono lawyers of these people, the lawyers, and some of them agreed to represent you in the United Nations and in other cases free of charge. You're going to have the contact information of them. However, this will be most of the end of the 12th seminar. For now, I would like to talk about the LIVE project and Northern Justice Watch. So Northern Justice Watch is a Canada-based collective established in 2023, united in our commitment to fight against the crimes against humanity. We are a registered not-for-profit, and we have developed the LIVE project. The LIVE project was funded by the Law Foundation of Ontario. The Law Foundation of Ontario is established in 1974 under the Law Society Act. What this foundation does is they uses the interest in all of the lawyers' trust accounts interest to support legal education, legal research, legal aid, and law libraries in Ontario. For example, legal aid, many of you, I believe, heard of that. That is funded by the Law Foundation of Ontario. Kenley, another big website in accessing the justice. That is funded by the Law Foundation of Ontario. And the LIVE project is also funded by the Law Foundation of Ontario, and we are greatly appreciative of their support. So now I would like to talk about the LIVE project. What's LIVE project? LIVE project stands for Legal Understanding and Victim Empowerment. LIVE project was developed by Northern Justice Watch and funded by the Law Foundation of Ontario, and it was created to empower the victims of atrocity crimes through comprehensive legal education on their Canadian and international laws. We would like to foster advocacy, justice seeking, and community-led solutions for marginalized groups affected by systematic injustice. So, at the end of this project, we know Ontarians in general, and also Ontarians from diaspora communities who suffered from crimes against humanity know exactly what their rights are in domestic, meaning in Canada, and international laws. So I have said that this will be the first of 12 upcoming seminars. So here you can see the table of contents for 2025 seminars. Today we are going to talk about the basics, the fundamentals of international legal works for human rights. And in the next seminar, we will talk about the atrocity crimes. What are atrocity crimes? How do we define it? What's genocide? And how to gather evidence. In the next one, we're going to talk about the International Court of Justice, how to bring cases to UN. And at the chapter, we're going to talk about Canada-wide solutions. For example, Canada-wide acts, human rights laws. Seminar 5 will consist of Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and Ontario's Human Rights Code and Enforcement Mechanism. And here is the list of our upcoming seminars that we will have in 2026. Now, I would like to talk about our first seminar, International Legal Frameworks for Human Rights. Throughout this LIVE project, we will talk a lot about human rights, UN, United Nations, treaties, covenants, genocide, atrocity crimes. Today, I would like to introduce you with the fundamentals of international law. So first, let's talk about rights. We're going to say a lot in this program, in this education. We will talk a lot about rights. But what are rights? Rights are entitlements to perform or not to perform certain actions, or to be or not to be in certain states. For example, right to get married. So when you have right to get married, you have the right to perform certain action. Right to be free from arbitrary detention. When we talk about that, we are talking about your right to not to be in certain state. So now you might ask yourself, why do I have these rights? Where are these rights coming from? So we would like to the rights are a very broad concept, but for the purpose of the LIVE education, we are mostly going to talk about your rights under domestic law, which is Ontario and Canada law, as well as your international laws. Your rights under Canadian law simply exist either because you're living in Ontario, you're in Ontario, or you're a Canadian. Your rights under international law, on the other hand, arise generally from international covenants and treaties. So I now would like to talk about human rights. As I told before, the human rights are a broad concept. For the live education, we will be talking a lot about human rights. So what are human rights? Human rights, a set of fundamental rights that all people possess simply by virtue of being a human beings. These rights are universal, inalienable, and indivisible, which means they apply to all people everywhere at all times. They cannot be negotiated nor waived. United Nations describes human rights as human rights are inherent to all human beings, regardless of their race, sex, nationality, ethnicity, language, religion, or any other status. So human rights exist simply because you are a human being. So according to the Canadian Human Rights Commission, everyone is entitled to same fundamental human rights. There are 30 of them. They are universal, and we, as the citizens of the world, have agreed what we are entitled to. So human rights describes how we instinctively expect to be treated as persons. They define what we are all entitled as human beings: the life of equality, dignity, respect, and a life free from discrimination. Another thing is, I just mentioned that your international rights generally arise from treaties and covenants. However, human rights, your international human rights, including you have those rights. You do not have to earn those rights. They're not coming from any other source. You have them because you're a human being. You're born with them. They are the same for every person. Nobody can give them to you. However, they can be taken away. And now you might ask yourself, if I have this basic 30 human rights and it's applied to me all the times and it applies everyone in the world, why do countries have human rights legislations? So the countries have human rights laws to make sure that people and governments are held accountable if your human rights are not respected. In Canada, your human rights are protected by provincial, territorial, federal, and international laws. So sorry for this. So I just explained that there are 30 basic human rights that everyone in the world is entitled. We will go on the details of what these human rights, basic human rights are, universal basic human rights are. We are going to talk about the Canadian and international legal systems for human rights and mechanisms. We'll all talk about all of this in the next seminars. However, for the purpose of this seminar, we would like to introduce you with the basics. That's why this seminar will go mostly on understanding the fundamental concepts, and the remaining will come later. So I just wanted to clarify this one. I now would like to talk about the United Nations. So what's the United Nations? United Nations is an international organization founded in 1945. To join the United Nations, a country becomes a member of the UN. Once joined, these countries are called member states. For example, Canada joined the UN and it became member of the UN. Now we can address Canada as a member state. There are currently 195 recognized countries in the world, and 193 of them are member states. So as you can see, United Nations has a very broad scope. Now, how the United Nations was founded? It founded by its charter, and it operates on the basis of its charter. What's a charter? Just like a company's have articles of incorporation, a charter is a legal document that establishes and defines an organization, outlining its purpose, structure, and key operating principles. It's the founding document of United Nations, which was signed and came into force in 1945. So in this charter, you'll see that if you ever look at the charter, you'll see there are 6 main bodies of the United Nations, and they're all in the charter. So the main bodies of the United Nations are the General Assembly, where all the member states have a representative, Security Council, Economic and Social Council, the Trusteeship Council, the International Court of Justice, and the Secretariat. For the purpose of the live project, we will mainly focus on the International Court of Justice and the Security Council bodies of the United Nations. So we will explain this in depth later on. However, I now would like to introduce you what's the International Court of Justice, because sometimes you can hear phrases like, I would like to start a case in International Court of Justice. How do I do that? Which we will explain how later on. However, as a general description, the International Court of Justice is one of the main bodies of the United Nations. It is the principal judicial organ of the United Nations. For example, in Canada, we have different judicial organs. We have Supreme Court, we have Superior Court, we have a small claims court, divisional courts. An International Court of Justice is just like that, is the principal judicial organ of the United Nations. It operates on the basis, the International Court of Justice operates basis on the statute of International Court of Justice, which we will explain when we come to that part in the latest seminar. But this is as a general description. I would like to bring that to your attention. So, what's the statute of the International Court of Justice? To understand that, let's first start what this statute is. Statute is a written law enacted by a legislative body, such as Parliament. For example, in Canada, there's Canadian Parliament, and they are enacting some statutes. The legislative body of the United Nations is a General Assembly where all the members have 1 seat, just like in Parliament. You can think of that. So in the United Nations, their General Assembly, all the members have 1 seat, and the statute, the law of the International Court of Justice is actually enacted by the representatives of all member states sitting in the General Assembly. Therefore, the statute of the International Court of Justice is the written law enacted by the United Nations General Assembly. So now I would like to talk about a Security Council. According to United Nations website, the Security Council has the responsibility for the maintenance of the international peace and security. It has 15 members, and each member has 1 vote. Under the Charter of the United Nations, which means its founding document, all member states are obligated to comply with the Council decisions. The Security Council takes the lead in determining the existence of a threat to the peace and act of aggression. It calls upon the parties to dispute to settle it or by peaceful means, and recommends methods or adjustments or terms of settlements. In some cases, the Security Council can resort to imposing sanction or even authorize the use of force to maintain and restore international peace and security. Again, the UN Security Council will come later to the play. However, to understand what it is, it's one of the main bodies of the United Nations, and it has the primary responsibility of maintenance of international peace and security. Now, let's talk about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights is adopted in 1948, and it's a foundational United Nations document affirming universal rights for all individuals, regardless of their race, gender, or nationality. It consists of 30 articles. before that, I said there are 30 human rights. And again, there are 30 articles covering 30 fundamental human rights. So Universal Declaration of Human Rights is adopted by the United Nations. Now, for our purpose of live education, I would like to talk about some of the articles that we think it is very important. First, I would like to talk about the Article 7, which of the Universal UDHR, which is equality before the law. So Article 7 ensures equal protection under the law for all, a principle central in empowering victims to seek justice for the atrocities. So Article 7 is equality before law. Article 8 talks about provides the right to seek justice for violations of fundamental rights through national tribunals, a core focus of life, national tribunals, which is a core focus of life. I also would like to talk about Article 10, a right to fair trial. Everyone has a right to fair trial and a public hearing. And presumption of innocence is covered by the Article 11. Everyone is entitled to presumption of innocence. Sometimes you can hear such as something in the TV, like everyone is innocent until proven guilty. So that is mostly come from the Article 11, presumption of innocence. Now, these were about the justice and legal empowerment. I also now would like to talk about the freedom and protection from articles related to freedom and protection from atrocities. So Article 3 ensures that everyone has a right to life, liberty, and security. Article 4 is a protection, freedom from slavery, and Article 5 is freedom from torture and cruel and inhumane treatment. So the reason that I have choose these articles for this presentation is because I know that there are many of you who have gone through some hard times, and I know that some of you and some of your family members' right to life, liberty, and security has been violated. Some of you has not been free from torture, cruel, or inhumane treatment. And I understand that. My and our purpose by this education is for you to know your rights and for you to know how to enforce these rights. So at the end of this seminars, if one of you goes and says that, hi, my name is this, and I believe that my right to be free from torture, cruel, and inhumane treatment is violated by police officers in my home country, and I know exactly where to go. I know exactly what are more legal recourses. I know if I should go to the Human Rights Commission or if I should go to the International Court of Justice. If you know this, which we really hope that you will see this, you will know this by the end of this education, then that is a gain for us. Same goes for your rights under Ontario law. We are going to talk a lot about the Ontario Human Rights Code and discrimination. If you believe that you were subject to discrimination, and if you go to the Ontario Human Rights Tribunal, if you know how to do that, then that is a win for us. I know that seeing these rights here, you might think that, okay, I have these rights, but they're not respected by government or by other people. And we really hope that you will know how to make them respected at the end of this education. You know how to keep people accountable if they don't respect it. We really hope you'll know this. So now I would like to talk about Article 19, which is freedom of opinion and expression. Article 20 is freedom of assembly and association. These articles are especially important because sometimes we see that the oppressive governments are used the counterterrorism laws to silence the minorities, silence to opposing views. That's why I wanted to include these two here. Now I would like to talk about the articles related to human dignity. Article 1 is the freedom and equality in dignity and rights. Article 2 is freedom from discrimination, and Article 28 is right to a free and fair world order. So again, these were your main human rights under your international main human rights that's been recognized by the UN. Again, you have these rights just simply by virtue of being human being. Everyone in the world at all times have these rights. I just wanted to give a main framework for your international human rights. Now I would like to talk about the treaties and covenants. So because throughout this education, we're going to say that, okay, my right to, for example, my right to be free from, let's say, my right to be free from, my right to fair trial was violated, let's say, and you think that your country has violated this law. You think that, for example, you're from Turkey. So you want to go and do something. And in this concept, the treaties are going to be important. Why they're going to be important? Because they are one of the legal mechanisms where we can go to the country and say that, hi, you agreed to give me this right, or you agreed to do not subject me to genocide, and let's say that you believe that your country committed genocide. So treaty routes or conventions and treaties routes are something that we can go other than International Court of Justice route. So that's why I would like to talk about treaties. Treaties are binding written agreements enacted by the international law actors, such as states or international organizations. So because treaties are agreements, they only bind the contracting parties. For example, if a country A, B, and C signs a treaty, we call them contracting parties, the provisions of that treaty will not bind to country D, which did not sign that treaty. The terms treaty and covenant are used interchangeably in the international law context. So now I would like to talk about the definition, the difference between treaties and agreement. Treaties at their core are agreements. However, treaties differ from the agreements you see in your daily lives. For example, you go to a store and you wanted to buy a fridge and they gave you a contract. They differ from that. And Javier want to explain this with an example. Let's look at the scenario 1. Jon Snow and Cersei Lannister are both living in Ontario. Jon wants to sell his television and Cersei wants to purchase it. They draft and sign a purchase agreement for the sale of the television with the effective date as the signature date. For example, let's say that I am saying, Jon Snow, selling you, Cersei, this television on this date of February 1st, 2025. And you are going to pay $100 for me in exchange for the television. In this scenario, the agreement will be effective the moment they sign it. The Cersei will give $100 to Jon Snow, and then Jon Snow will give the television to Cersei Lannister, and that agreement is completed. Now I would like to talk about a different scenario, scenario 2. Country Peaston and Country Finlandia want to sign an international treaty for the protection of endangered species and biodiversity. They draft and sign an international treaty setting out the obligation of Peaston and Finlandia for protecting endangered species in their countries. In scenario 2, although both of them signed the treaty that day, the treaty between those countries does not automatically become effective. So just because the representative of countries sign a treaty doesn't mean that that agreement is now effective and binding on both parties. Unlike domestic contracts, international treaties require additional formal steps before they take effect. These steps include acceptance or approval or ratification. However, in a domestic agreement like John and Cersei's, the act of signing the contract is sufficient for agreement to be legally binding and enforceable. So, if you are having a problem up until this point, please let me know in the Google chat. I'm happy to explain this further if you have any questions.
Yeah, just as a reminder to our audience, we're still collecting questions. So please feel free to submit your questions using the Q&A function. You can also submit anonymously, and we will answer the questions at the end of the event. Thank you.
So again, I will like to reiterate that in a domestic contract, like such as purchase and sale agreements, the signing the very agreement is necessary. The very act of signing. However, international treaties and covenants, they are a bit more complicated than that. So in order for a treaty to be binding, effective, and enforceable against a country, two levels of processes must be completed. First of all, at the international level, the country must become a part of the treaty. To do this, a country may negotiate and sign the treaty, which is signing is demonstrating a country's intention to comply. Or they can do that by via accession. Accession is an alternative mechanism for countries that did not participate in the initial negotiation and signing of the treaty. By acceding to a treaty, a country is bound as if they had signed and ratified it. That was what was required at the international level. So now I have signed the document or I acceded it, and now I have a contract at the international level. However, in order for my citizens to go to, for example, United Nations and say that my rights under this treaty are violated, at the national level, the country also must incorporate the treaty into its domestic legal systems to make it effective and enforceable internally. So to do this, a country may ratify the treaty, use an acceptance or approval mechanism, and adopt the treaty into national law. The ratifying a treaty means ratification is a formal act, and often by the head or state of the parliament. It's done by the state of the parliament or head of the government. And with the ratification, a country consents to be legally bound by the treaty. So they say, okay, we signed this agreement in the international level. Now we are ratifying it internally by our parliament, and then we are going to be bound by it. It's going to be enforceable. Another mechanism that they can use to make it binding and enforceable is acceptance and approval mechanism. Some treaties allow countries to use mechanism like acceptance and approval instead of ratification, which in the practice, it may allow a countries to bylaw certain domestic formal procedures while still achieving the same effect of being binding and enforceable. And the other route that they can use is adopt the treaty into national law. So for treaties provision to have a practical domestic legal effect, the country may need to implement a legislation or amend its existing laws with the treaty's provisions and obligations. For example, in Ontario, we have Human Rights Code, and in that Human Rights Code, we are talking about 30 fundamental human rights, right? So that is an international level. We have Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and in Canada, by enacting laws and statutes and legislation, the Canadian government recognizes its obligations under that UDHR. What happens if a country do not take necessary steps to implement treaties domestically? So let's go back to our example. Country Piston and country Finlandia want to sign an international treaty for the protection of endangered species and biodiversity. They draft and sign an international treaty setting out the obligations of Piston and Finlandia for protecting endangered species in their countries. By signing the treaty at the international level, Finland expresses its intent to comply with the treaty's objectives and obligations. However, signing alone does not make the treaty legally binding for Finland. After the signing ceremony, Finland's government failed to complete the necessary domestic ratification process. Perhaps the treaty is not approved by the parliament due to political opposition, or simply government doesn't want to pass the implementing legislation. So what happens? What happens in that scenario? At the international level, Finland has no binding legal obligation to comply with the treaty under international law because it didn't ratify it. At the national level, since Finland did not ratify the treaty, its provisions are not legally enforceable within its domestic legal system. Finland's citizens, business, or government agencies are not obligated to follow the treaty's requirements. For instance, Finland's forestry industry may continue to logging in the protected areas, harming endangered species without facing domestic legal penalties. That's why the ratification process is very important for the purpose of our education. Now I would like to talk about the concept of the reservations. Reservation is a statement made by a country when it signs or ratifies a treaty, indicated that although it wants to still be bound by the treaty, it does not intend to be fully bound with every provision of that treaty. Essentially, as reservation allows a country to opt out of specific obligations of the treaty while still remaining a part to overall agreement. This can happen during the signing or ratification process. The reservations are usually allowed as long as they are consistent with the treaty's object and its purpose. It allows a country to become a party while excluding certain provisions that the country finds problematic or incompatible with its domestic policies. Reservations help countries to participate in international agreements without fully committing to every aspect of the treaty. And this concept of reservation will become an important step very soon because we will talk about the important international treaties. So let's talk about the scenario 2. Finland is about to ratify an international treaty with the protection of endangered species and biodiversity signed with the country Piston. Finland's government agrees with treaty's overall objectives, but has concerns about the specific provision related to protecting species in certain natural reserves. Finland's government believes that this provision could interfere with their economic interests, such as logging in certain areas. Finland decides to make a reservation to this provision. They announced that while they ratify the treaty, they will not be bound by specific obligations to create new protected areas for endangered species. So let's talk about, now that they have a reservation, what's the practical effect of it at the international level? Finland is still considered a party to treaty and bound by its broader obligations. However, they are not bound by the specific provisions they reserve. At the national level, Finland's domestic law may adjust to comply with the treaty's broader obligations. However, they can exclude specific provisions related to creating new protected areas as it made a reservation to that party of the treaty. And what happens for the forestry who wanted to really rely on that specific provisions that a country reserved? The answer is nothing. If a country made a reservation under a specific obligation and it doesn't bound by that term, so we might not have the protection or we might not have the legal recourse to instead go to the treaty mechanism that I'll explain later on and enforce that specific provision against that country. So in that scenario, we may think about other different alternatives for justice seeking. Now, I would like to talk about the important treaties that is fundamental to this education. Here are some important treaties for the Purpose of Life project. The Genocide Convention, officially known as the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. It is a UN convention adopted by the United Nations General Assembly. Geneva Conventions, first adopted in 1864 and substantially revised in 1949 after World War II. They are a series of international treaties created under the auspices of International Committee of the Red Cross and the Swiss government. So when we talk about the Geneva Conventions, we cannot go to UN for Geneva Conventions. Why? Because it's not a UN treaty. It is the committee, it's the Treaty of International Committee of the Red Cross. However, although it's not a UN creation, the Geneva Conventions have been signed and ratified by almost every country in the world. And that's why they are recognized as a customary international law. They are so fundamental, although they are not created by UN General Assembly like the Genocide Convention, they are so fundamental and almost recognized by every country. It's now a customary international law. So now I would like to talk about other treaties, the UN general treaties, such as Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. So collectively, these three treaties collectively form the International Bill of Human Rights. There are also specialized treaties, the Convention of the Rights of the Child, the Convention of the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. Now, I would like to talk about the some provisions and some treaties that your countries, the countries where most of you are coming from, are signed, whether they have made a reservation. This would be the foundational strategic document that we will use and you will use later on. However, before going through this, I would like to now give a 10-minute break. And after that, we can look at these treaties and whether a country made a reservation or not, and talk about the practical effects thereof. So now I would like to take 10 minutes of break, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we take the break, I'd like to mention that we have an evaluation form. If you can have this, have the link in the chat, please submit your feedback. You can do this during the break or after watching participating in the second part. Your opinions are really important to us, and they will direct our future work. So please open the link and submit your feedback. We're expecting you to be here in 10 minutes. Please, after a short break, we will continue with the interesting presentation by Hilal. Thank you. Hello and welcome back, everyone. We'll be starting the second part of the event shortly. Thanks for being with us. We're having a couple of questions in the Q&A session already. So again, please feel free to let us know your questions, and we're happy to answer. And as I already said, you can submit your questions anonymously as well. There we go. Okay. Hilal is also here. You're muted now, but yeah, there we go.
Hi everyone. So I would like to first answer to Joanne's questions. Will the presentation slides be made publicly available? So we will have the slides and much more in our live project website. It's currently being designed and it will have all the information, legal education, modules like we're doing right now, seminars, but much more detailed versions of this will be in the modules, which will be on the website, completely accessible to public, free of charge. There are going to be guidelines, booklets. For example, at the beginning, Sierra, I believe Sierra, talk about the genocide in Tigray and what they want to do to recognize it. So we are planning on building a web form where you'll enter the information and the available avenues for pursuing justice as an individual, as an NGO, or as a state will come. So we are currently building that website. These materials, models, booklets, and much more information will be available via Live Project website. You can right now go through the Live Projects, information about the Live Project through Northern Justice Watch's website, but yes, John. And another one is Mr. Hasrat. I'm just asking, do you have any documentation and research program for investigating some certain cases of major human rights violations? So we have other projects and we are investigating and a lot of that. However, I would like to make it clear that the purpose of the Live project is not to bring or fund the legal cases against countries. It is to teach the routes to the individual, to increase the education, increase the public's awareness of their rights. However, for this, we are talking about pro bono lawyers right now, and we're trying to make and compile a list of all the pro bono lawyers who agreed to work with the communities that we are right now giving education to, and they would like to take the lead on investigating certain cases or major human rights violations or assisting communities in, for example, going to International Court of Justice, let's say, or UN. They would like to assist you on that one. That's why that is going to be another step that needs to be taken. Right now, we are just trying to raise awareness and bring individuals who are informed of their rights. However, we are in contact with the pro bono lawyers who will, at the end of this live program and live models, will be working with the communities. Okay. So now I would like to talk about certain covenants and treaties. Let me share my screen. Do I share my screen right now? Yes. Okay. First, I would like to talk about Genocide Convention. So, Genocide Convention, as you recognize, was officially known as the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Crime of Genocide. It's a UN convention adopted by the United Nations of General Assembly. So, for the communities that right now we are here, for example, Turkey, Turkey government ratified the Genocide Convention. For Hazara community, Afghanistan has ratified with no reservation. Ethiopia for Chinese, for the Tigrayan community, they also ratified with no reservations. China for Uyghurs ratified. They have made the reservation on Article 9, which is the jurisdiction of International Court of Justice in disputing the concerns regarding this convention. So that's really unfortunate, of course. For Iraq, also for Hazara people, ratified the Genocide Convention with no reservations, and Syria is acceded with no reservations. So these Genocide Convention is a route that we can ask if we can go, and we will get into this, and we can say, for example, as a Tigrayan people, my rights under Genocide Convention are violated. Now, I would like to talk about the Geneva Conventions. As you can remember, Geneva Conventions are now recognized as a customary international law. They are a series of international treaties created under the International Committee of the Red Cross and Swiss government. For Geneva Conventions, Turkey ratified, Afghanistan ratified, Ethiopia ratified, China ratified, Iraq ratified, Syria ratified. None of them made any reservations. So the other important treaties that we can use is ISSPR, International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Turkey again ratified, Afghanistan acceded, Ethiopia acceded, China signed and not ratified, unfortunately for our Uyghur listeners. So they are right now not bound by this ISSPR, even though they signed, they have not ratified it. Iraq again acceded, and Syria has signed, again, Syria not ratified. I am talking about signed and not ratified, and we have talked about what's the difference between signing and ratifying or acceding for the treaties. That's why I wanted to first explain that concept. That's why, for example, if we want to go against China under a violation for ISSPR and we want to go to UN, since it's not ratified, we need to find different course of action. Now I would like to talk about ISSPR. Sorry, we already talked about ISSPR. Now I would like to talk about ICESR. However, again, this Syria acceded, Iraq acceded, China again signed and not ratified. That is a problem with us. Again, with the CRS, Turkey has ratified, however, made reservations until the Articles 17, 29, and 30. 17 is with regards to access to information, 29 is aims of education, and 30 is rights of children belonging to minorities. They have made reservations on that one. Afghanistan, Ethiopia, they ratified with no reservations. China has unfortunately made reservations until Article 6, Iraq ratified, and Syria with no reservations. And again, the Syria has made reservations until Article 14, which is freedom of conscience and religion. Articles 20, protection of children without families, and 21 is the adoption. So that's unfortunate. 4 is CEDAW. Turkey has reservations under Article 9 and 29, which is equal rights with respect to nationality and the arbitration of disputes. Afghanistan acceded without reservation. Ethiopia ratified without reservation. China made a reservation under Article 29, and Article 29 is again arbitration of the disputes. For Iraq, they acceded. They have made reservations on multiple articles, including the Article 2, policy measures, nationality of children, freedom of movement. They made reservations under that. And Syria, they also made a myriad of reservations under this article 2, 9, 15, 16. So why did we explain this? So we have talked about the importance of enforcing treaty mechanisms in the concept of seeking justice. So, for example, let's talk about, although we're going to talk about that in later seminars, let's say that the Tigrayan community wants to get genocide recognized as a genocide. So, for example, what can they do? They can go to the International Criminal Court. However, the Ethiopian government is not a party to the Rome Statute. That's why the jurisdiction can be it can be a problem if they want to go to International Criminal Court. So another route that they can take is a universal jurisdiction route. So, for example, they can pursue legal action in countries where they recognize universal jurisdiction, such as Belgium, Germany, and Spain. So this is another route that they can take. The other route that they can take, they can go to African Commission on Human and People's Rights. They can go to International Court of Justice for UN treaties and for the violation of the Genocide Convention, because the Genocide Convention is not it's enforced by different UN bodies. And also they can go and file a case, so they can go in United Nations Human Rights Council, they can go and apply to that. They can go to special rapporteur. So there are options that they can take. So, for example, let's think about these different routes that they can take, whether if they apply for the decision, if that is binding, and who can apply for that decision. For example, let's say Tigrayan community wants to go to International Court of Justice. And International Court of Justice adjudicates the disputes between states concerning breach of international law, including human rights treaties. So, if the Tigrayan community in Canada wants to go to International Court of Justice, this is binding on the states part of the case, but compliance varies. It is enforceable via UN Security Council, but enforcement depends on political will and cooperation of the states, and the individuals directly cannot go and apply to that. International Criminal Court, the states, again, UN Security Council or ICC can initiate a procedure under International Criminal Court. However, if the individual wants to go and directly go to International Criminal Court, they cannot do that. So what they need to do, they need to the Tigrayan community need to find a state that is willing to bring a case in International Criminal Court against Ethiopia for the genocide. So that's why it's important to know what are your rights and which routes you can take, and should you decide to take that route, what you need to do. Another route that we can take is UN Human Rights Council. The UN Human Rights Council investigates gross human rights violations via special rapporteurs, working groups, and commissions of inquiry. However, the decisions are not binding. However, they are very influential in international law. They may pressure states through international attention. And if they want to go to UNHRC, individual groups, NGOs, and states, all of these people can submit complaints. That's why if they think that there is not enough mobilization in any of the states to take an action against Ethiopia by going to International Criminal Court, the individuals with the NGOs individuals, groups, or NGOs can directly go to UN Human Rights Council. The other part is the European Court of Human Rights. So European Courts of Human Rights is more relevant in the context of Turkey. Individuals, NGOs, and states can directly apply. Again, the decisions are binding on the member states and they are enforced domestically. For Tigray, they can go to the African Court on Human and People's Rights, and that actually adjudicates violations on African Charter and Human and People's Rights. However, again, that is binding on the state that have accepted the jurisdiction. So we need to go and check if the Ethiopia has accepted the jurisdiction on African Court on Human and People's Rights. Again, the individuals, if the state permits, can bring an application in African Court on Human and People's Rights. The states and African Commission can directly bring a complaint. Other than that, we can go to UN treaty bodies. So they monitor compliance on UN's human rights treaties. For example, let's say Bill of Rights. We have talked about the Bill of Rights. They examine state reports and individual complaints. That's why individuals and groups, provided that the state recognized that treaty body's jurisdiction, for example, provided that Ethiopia recognized UN's treaty body's jurisdiction, can apply for a decision under that. The decisions are not binding for UN treaty bodies, but they are highly influential in international law. They can also go and to advocate for bringing a special tribunal, and that special tribunal under the UN can only be initiated by UN Security Council or prosecutors. However, with enough influence, they can, the Tigrayan community can apply to UN Security Council or refer cases or bring reports and UNHRC decisions and bring that to UN Security Council's attention to build a special tribunal on genocide on Tigray. So the special tribunals prosecutes gross human rights violations. For example, for Yugoslavia, for Rwanda, there were special tribunals, and that decision of that is binding on the convicted individuals. Lastly, the UN Security Council is another mechanism. They addresses gross human rights violations, threatening international peace. States and UN bodies typically initiate actions in UN Security Council. It's binding on UN member states. So this is going to UN Security Council for establishing a tribunal or for a specific decision is not something that an individual or NGO can go do it alone. They can only do it with enough advocacy and enough support. So as you can see, depending on who you are, depending on if you have a state that you can convince to bring an application on behalf of you, the routes that they can take, routes that a community take for human rights violations, differs. So, okay. So that's again some decision and routes that that's a very high view summary of what, as an individual, you can do if you think that your rights are violated under the international law. So for the second seminar, we're going to talk about atrocity crimes, what's genocide, what's crimes against humanity. And then we are going to make community-based case study, for example, for Tigrayans and for Hazaras, on what they can do if they would like to recognize, if they would like to go and pursue accountability for their for the genocide that happened in Ethiopia. In this seminar, I wanted to introduce you in basic concepts, and I also would like to provide a very high level overview on what can I do, so what will we do in this education. Again, this is for the international mechanisms. I will also talk about the human rights mechanisms in Ontario in the next seminars. However, there will be a specific case studies that that we are preparing for Hazaras, for Tigrayans, and for Turkish community in the next seminars and their routes that they can take under the international law. And for now, I would like to get to your questions, because this is the end of seminar chapter 1.
Thank you, Hilal. I'd like to, so while you're typing your questions, I'd like to really thank you, Hilal, because that was a really important part, especially the last one. What we've been hearing at Northern Justice Watch, we've been hearing from various, not one, not two, but a lot of the victim communities in Canada is that there's sometimes this belief that international state-based response to a persecution has been insufficient. So we sometimes ask the question, why is the International Court of Justice not taking any action? Or why isn't there already an arrest warrant for this dictator or this for war criminal, right? Why isn't the International Criminal Court is doing anything? And I think these are valid questions and these are valid feelings to have. Sometimes we expect really direct and immediate action by state-based organizations like the International Court of Justice or International Criminal Court. But I think one of the really important parts of this, he does important presentation, is that sometimes even if states are not willing to or able to take action, citizens, so in this case, members of the Tibet, Tigray, the Turkish community, or the Hazara community, or the Yazidi community, or any victims of persecution, can still take action themselves, and they can still lobby governments, lobby states in working together with various NGOs and maybe exert some political influence to get these institutions to take action. So that's of course, not a particularly easy task. You're lobbying and getting together and advocating in an organized manner. But there are avenues through United Nations and other justice mechanisms that everyone in this meeting right now, and including our valuable community representatives, can actually work together with their communities to take action. So I think that was really important, and that just means that we don't have to rely on state action to access justice. And I think that's one of the main points of the LIFE project. That being said, please feel free to submit your questions. I'm seeing there is Mr. Sharap Tharchin wanted to talk about a reservation, China's reservation, Article 9 in Genocide Convention. I think if I'd like to give the stage to Mr. Sharaf Tharchin to talk a little bit about of their opinions on that.
So I think that's Sharap's question to
Oh, that was a
me.
question. Yes.
Yeah,
Sir, I read, could I speak? Sir, they asked you the question, right?
of course. So for what happens is that when a country make a reservation, let's say article has 10 provisions. Let's simplify this. I say I am going to do this act. Second, I'm going to do X act, Y act, Z act, T act. Let's say that. And there's like 10 provisions in the article. I can, as a country, go and say that, hi, I would like to be generally bound by this treaty. However, I did not like the provision in Article 5. It says that I will do X, Y. I am okay with doing X, Y, Z. However, I am not comfortable doing W, the Act W. So in that case, they make a reservation under this article. What's that means? I am reserving this article. This article, although treaties, the remaining articles, I am going to be bound by, I'm going to imply those. I will not be bound by this specific article. So in China's case, China has a reservation on Article 9 of the Genocide Convention. The Article 9 of the Genocide Convention says that International Court of Justice has a jurisdiction in resolving disputes concerning the interpretation and application of the convention. What's that mean is if there is a problem, let's say if there is a human rights violations, and if the China is brought to International Court of Justice, then the International Court of Justice does not have jurisdiction over China to resolve that complaint. So there are some UN cases, which we will talk about that. Although there are reservation on certain articles, they are making some exceptions. So I'm going to talk all about that. However, the reservation in general means that I am not the country that accepted that treaty is not going to bound by that specific provision. And in China's case, Article 9, it is the jurisdiction of International Court of Justice over China for resolving genocide issues, genocide-related matters, or China's infringement of Genocide Convention. Is this answer your question, Sharab? Okay, so I will talk about the case of Tamils and Uyghurs as a case study throughout this project. And in there, we will talk more in depth about the reservation and what can we do. However, for now, since this is the fundamental, I do not want to overload you with the information, but we'll talk about it in the later seminars, don't worry. So I have another question by Mr. Sharan. Check if Mongolia, Australia, Canada, and New Zealand can take the Hazara genocide case to International Court of Justice. I am not sure at the top of my head about these countries, Sharan. What I will do is I will check that, and then at Twitter tonight, we are going to respond to that question because I do not want to say something wrong without first looking into every country there. Is that okay?
Thank you very much. That's great. I wasn't expecting you to say that, but it would be great if you update us on that. Thank you.
No worries. Are there any questions about the fundamentals? Is anyone okay, like understood the basic concept? What's United Nations? What's treaties? What's covenants? Is everyone okay with that? Is everyone okay with the concept of international human rights?
You wanted to take an exam?
So for the scenarios, actually, my initial intention was to ask you that, but however, I'm like, okay, let's not make it interactive yet. But for the case studies, I want to make it interactive. And then I would appreciate that so that there's more involvement. But yeah.
Can I ask you a question, Hilal?
Yeah.
Something that's sometimes I see on social media, people use International Criminal Court and International Court of Justice interchangeably, right? Sometimes people ask, why isn't the International Court of Justice issuing an arrest warrant, or why is the ICC not doing it? I think International Court of Justice is more like concerned with prosecuting states, and International Criminal Court is issuing arrest warrants against individuals, right?
So, no. So what difference is International Court of Justice is the principal organ of the United Nations.
Yes.
It operates under United Nations. However, the International Criminal Code is for a different statute. It's established by the Rome Statute. It's not established by United Nations. It is established by Swiss government, Swiss government, and that's why they are different. Two of them are actually different courts. However, the people might use them interchangeably. I understand that, and the reason is that is it's just like there are a lot of treaties and covenants and international organs that in existence, and sometimes people might not be fully aware of which is which,
Yeah.
but the main difference between International Court of Justice and International Criminal Court is International Criminal Court is operate under the Rome Statute, and International Court of Justice is operates under the United Nations, whereas International Criminal Court operates under the Red Cross. So they are different.
Yeah, thanks for the explanation. All countries are kind of parties to the International Court of Justice in a way, but not all countries are in the International Criminal Court. But Canada is a party, right? Canada is a party to the International Criminal Court.
Canada
That
is party to Rome Statute.
the Rome Statute, right? Which is the underlying document of the court, right? So if, for example, if say the Tigray community, for example, is successful encouraging a state to bring this case to the International Criminal Court, and if there is an arrest warrant, if that person comes to Canada, they will be arrested, correct?
So we are going to talk about that.
Okay.
I mean, technically, yes.
Okay.
However, the enforcement is
Yeah.
done through the state. So we are not, I cannot say if they come to Canada, they will arrest it on the spot for sure,
Yeah.
because technically they need to get arrested for that in
Well,
Canada.
there are also political considerations sometimes,
Not even
right?
consideration.
Yeah.
Very basic thing. They
Yeah.
might just enter and via passport, and their passports might not be checked. Like, it's they might
Yeah.
be a bunch of stuff
Yeah.
that's done, because at the end of the day, the enforcers of these decisions, these arrest warrants, are people. Let's say on the border agency, let's say a police officer, and they might not even recognize that person, and they might not even know that there is an arrest warrant for them.
Yes.
We're going to talk more about this, but technically, yes.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for answering my question. If I'm gonna give a minute for anyone to submit any more questions. Otherwise, if you don't have any more questions, we can conclude the event. I would like to again remind that we have an evaluation form link in the chat. Please click on it, and you will be taken to a form where you can submit your feedback about this event. Please follow us on social media. Our social media pages are Justice Watch on Instagram, Twitter. We also have LinkedIn. Feel free to follow our pages. We use them regularly to update on our events. You can find much more details there. And that being said, if you have anything to add, Hilal, go ahead, please.
Yes, I would like to thank all of you for being here today. So, in international law, because the countries are sovereign, the concept of justice and accountability are often a exception, not a norm. We would like to give you enough information and education on knowing that it doesn't always have to be like that. Yes, it is so much harder. I'm not a Pollyanna to go and look for your rights, enforce your rights under the international mechanisms because there's much more actors at play. However, if you know what your rights are and if you are empowered, but even by that knowledge, that is something that we would be very happy and proud of until, the rest of our lives. So I would like to thank you all for being here, coming to a different country, yet still seeking justice for your communities, for yourself, or even just to basically learn your rights. And thank you so much for that. We have created this program as a response to so many questions that we have received over the course of 2 years. Every community member that we ever spoke of said, but okay, you're saying that I have rights, but what are my rights? What can I do as a community? They're like, what should I do? Like, I know that my rights are violated. What should I do? I want to talk to my MP. And that is a very good route, talking to your MPs and, raising awareness. However, we created the specific project so that you can learn your legal international rights and your domestic rights in Canada regarding human rights issues, both for international mechanism, for the human rights issues that you experience back in your country, and also for all Ontarians in general, the human rights issues that you have experienced in Canada. Even for a Canadian, a normal person, normal Canadian person can go and say that I was subject to discrimination. We also want to teach that. So this is an international and domestic human rights education program. And again, this was created as a response to the many of the questions that we received over the years. That's why it's very important for this project to reach as much as people as possible. For that, we are understanding that learning English is hard. Learning basic legal and legal basic concepts are hard. And we are understanding that learning law in a different language is even harder. That's why we have collaborated with some of the community representatives, and they will go to your community centers and your community events and give this education in your own language so that it will be easier for you and for everyone in your community to understand the concepts in here. I just wanted to give this information to you. So, and the materials and the website, there will be also, it's not just going to be translated in English, it's going to be translated in, for now, 5 different languages. Lastly, I would like to thank once again to the Law Foundation of Ontario for all of their support and funding to this project. Thank you.
Thank you again, everyone, for coming and for distinguished guest speakers. And we're hoping to see you again in our future events. Please feel free to reach out us through social media, and we will have many of the resources available online. And that's going to be all for today. Thanks, and please take care and have a nice weekend. Thank you.